What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the Moon Man here, and we are back with episode 146 of the video game therapy series. We live in interesting times, obviously, and I think it's easy to feel that nothing that you care about or that you're focused on is at all important because of everything going on, right? It's almost like this like a movie where it's a small town America and somebody's murdered or kidnapped or something, and there's if everything's going on and this is such crazy times. It's like I feel like people have been saying it's such a crazy time for my entire life. It's never not been a crazy time. Which, to be fair to them, I think if your only barometer of change is the last 100 years, it's easy to kind of extrapolate from that and go, well, fucking Jesus, everything's going to be totally different all the time. Nothing's ever going to be the same. But I think if you look for similarities, you'll find many ways in which life isn't much different, right? We still have to kind of eat, and barring a lot of these new fake foods that aren't real, we eat a lot of the same stuff. We eat, it's like we're still eating bread and meat and vegetables. It's not like we have this new food. We have new kinds of food or new varieties, but they're mostly just making everything Sour Patch flavored or something. Which, by the way, is it just a disgusting use of industrial chemicals? Because it's really what they are. But like making everything grape flavored, or like mixing. I mean, now they have they used to have Reeses and then like Reeses extra peanut butter or something. But now it's like they have like Reese's Oreo pie or like cheesecake Reese's or something. Like there's no end to any of these like flavor combinations, and they're not. It's not like they're just adding more, I don't know, synthetic runoff to to whatever, Oreo flavoring that they have. It's not real food. It's disgusting. But it is noticeably more, I'll say, like, disgusting variety of flavors now. I think the flavors are getting more and more extreme. I wouldn't be surprised if there's jalapeno Reese's within 5 years or something like that. Just because I guess people's tastes don't mature, I guess, or it's just children that's eating all of this. I mean, who is eating, cheesecake Oreo Reese cups, or whatever the flavors are, Sour Patch flavored, golf balls or something. It just doesn't make any sense. Who the fuck is eating this? Because it seems to me that this would be geared exclusively to children and only be sold like during Halloween or something like that. Where people are eating candy. But who regularly eats these? Like, who's like as a part of their grocery store haul is picking up Oreo cheesecake flavored Reese cups? Like that alone should be a crime. That they should have cops outside the grocery store just to arrest people that buy some of this stuff, because it truly is. I mean, whether you're eating that yourself, that should be akin to a form of suicide almost. Or your child or your dependent, and that should be child abuse. Shouldn't really be another way around that. Something I think that I have come around on. I mean, maybe not come around, but have I'm now more appreciative of is the I won't say direct relationship, but the incredibly strong correlation between what you put in your body in terms of like the food that you eat, and how you feel, or how your brain. Let's just take your body out of it, because I mean your body's most of it, but even just how your brain feels, given a different set of nutrients. It's quite, I don't know, significant. I've noticed just with I've been fucking with my diet a lot lately, so but I've come to really appreciate the difference. I used to think that, I guess my old thinking was that, well, as long as you cover your macronutrients for the most part, and your body's kind of good at filtering all this stuff, so just it'll a lot of the stuff will take care of yourself as long as you give it enough of the good stuff and limit the bad for the most part. But I think the potency of the bad is often undersold. So like people have like, well, one cheat day of something is going to make a big difference, or like one little cupcake or something can't hurt me that much. But as with the amount that I've learned about specifically celiacs, so gluten sensitivities, like even like a drop of gluten, or one little shred of gluten in something, could potentially cause problems for months. So even like the one little cheat day is still, that's still pretty significant, and that can fuck you up for a while. So even if your cheat day is once a week, that's even more than the frequency that would still cause significant noticeable problems with digestion and other things. I'm not saying that everyone's a celiac or everyone has, should be gluten free or something like that. But I just didn't really appreciate the gravity of the correlation between, like your gut health and your brain. And part of that's just through, reading that I'm doing and research, but also through, again, anecdotal, but still personal evidence. But anyway, yeah, it's, I don't know, people, it seems like it's I don't know. I didn't, even as someone that considered themselves very healthy, and like I was like, oh, I'm healthy. Like 5 years ago, I would track my calories, what I was eating, and my rule at that time, which I've said on here before, is that I'm allowed to eat whatever I want, but I just have to write it down, and that alone caused me to immediately eat a lot less shit because I would have to, if I'm eating Oreo, cheesecake flavored Reese's, I have to write down, 2 times cheesecake Oreo Reese's, and that's just like that shame alone, caused me to eat much much better. And I haven't really gotten like, well, I'll say like hyper fixated or hyper serious about it, until recently, but I do think it's undervalued. The other thing, just with this kind of circles back to my initial point in saying that, like, the things that you're focusing on or whatever you're thinking about always seem kind of insignificant because there's always just, what I might call like the injustice of the day. There's always some problem to focus on that seems bigger than you, and, without your help, nothing will happen or something. But it's like also simultaneously everyone has to do something at the same time. But like, if you don't do it, then you're a part of the problem. But like, I feel like that is also kind of it's a difficult, agreement to get in with people, especially to say that, like, there's always some, big bad somewhere that requires everyone to collectively do something, but there's not really any personal accountability for said collective action. So that kind of ends up in, everyone's saying they want to help, but no one does anything. So it's like people that are all vocally in support of, whatever thing it is, but then, practically nobody does anything. They're just kind of sitting there saying that they support it, but it's like, none of you have done anything, right? It's like, I guess to make an obvious example, it's like, well, we need to eat healthier and everyone's got to, we need to put less stress on our medical system. So people need to stop being fat or whatever. And it's like, okay, great. Yeah, I'm in support of that. But then, like, nobody's changing their diets or anything. Like, people even, like, I don't know, people are very vocal about the whole issue of medicine. And I'm not one to say that, everyone needs less health care. Like, we just need to remove health care entirely. Or I don't have any specific opinions about, private, public, Medicare. It's all a hodgepodge. I don't really understand most of it. And that, I'm just going to accept the ignorance of that. I don't know much about that. On purpose too. It's not like I don't care, to be frank. But I think people underestimate the amount that their own decisions plays in that. It's like, I'm not saying that, what about the people that get cancer? It's like, yes, I understand that there are people that, through no fault of their own, are wrapped up with the medical industry. But to act like that describes most people with their medical problems is comical. Most people's medical problems are they did it themselves, right? They ate their way to heart disease or diabetes or what, like, they caused their own problems. So, I'm not saying that, again, there is always room for sympathy, in this regard. It's not saying I don't have sympathy for anyone, but to act like the vast majority of people are just like, they randomly got lymphoma. It's like, no, they didn't. Okay, that is a sliver of the people that are actually hogging up all of the medical supplies and work and labor. That is most of those people, the people that are hogging all of this, got themselves in that problem. They're 600 pounds. They've never exercised. They have no idea what fiber or a protein or a carbohydrate is. They just see food and eat it. And some of this is, you could even go back then to blame, the education system to not educate people and, blame the food pyramid or something. But ultimately at some point we have to start pointing the fingers at individual people, right? We can't just keep blaming these faceless institutions that have shown time and time again that they can't do anything. Like, they're not going to change, right? People can yell and yell and yell about how bad education is, or that, kids don't want to learn, teachers don't want to teach, and everyone sucks. But like, that is not going to solve anything. What one part of the solution might be is for, your kids or yourself as, a student or a dumbass or whatever, to to take their own personal responsibility. But I guess in that sense, I do tend to, agree with, some of the libertarians that kind of take personal responsibility they might take it to an extreme degree. But I just think in the main points of discussion, politically, financially, or economically, I suppose. Uh, there is, I think, personal responsibility is often the first thing to kind of ignore. It's like, well, what about this scenario that is totally not their fault? And then it's like, that if you're in my position, kind of arguing on personal accountability, you're like, well, okay, but that's not their fault. But what percentage of situations is that actually described? And it's like, well, it's growing. It's 30%. It's like, okay, fine. Let's not focus on that then. What are the biggest fish? All right. What about the 70% of the fatties that are taking up all the healthcare costs? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your 10-year-old cousin that accidentally got lymphoma or broke their leg skateboarding. That's not why the whole medical system is morally and financially bankrupt. That's just not it. It's because of we eat like shit, we treat our bodies like shit, we treat our minds like shit. We garbage in, garbage out. I don't know how I don't even know how you expect to be healthy eating what people eat, right? I think again I didn't appreciate this to the extent that I did, eating Cheez-Its or whatever. But I don't think people realize that even like a small amount of a bad food will fuck you up for weeks. For weeks. Not to mention the sugar crash of a couple hours, and then the lethargy of a single day, and then to offset the sugar crash, might crack a monster or something. Then it all just becomes this big cycle of things. As someone that has poisoned themselves with many monsters over the years, I'm not giving myself a pass on any of this. I'm just kind of stressing to my future self or my imaginary audience that the importance of what you're putting in your body is paramount. And I didn't really appreciate that, I guess, up until late, where I've been much more strict about everything and felt much better. Unfortunately, I'm not much more cogent. I am still, still struggle to string thoughts together in a coherent manner. But I don't know. I guess we'll move on to the next thing. This other thing, just I guess this is similar to just like I don't know, society wide whatever. But because I was kind of observing old people today, and if you're living in the West or America, you do see old people just out and about, and um, then in general, I think the young kind of have a contemptuous, even jealous perception of the old, and I understand that completely, and I think the contempt is with regard to what might be selfishness or greed, but the jealousy is also that they the people, the Gen Xers and Boomers, have had a comically historic bull run of a financial market and a complete explosion of industry in their lifetime. And from their perspective, it's easy to extrapolate in the future and kind of accept these AI technologies because ultimately, like most of their, not saying their promises have all come true, but a lot of the bullshit like fake promises on things and these technologies in the future, again, it was spotty, but there's been a lot of like development, a lot of advancement. So a lot of these, some of these, out of the billions of promises that have been made, a couple thousand have actually come true, and that has also resulted in an exorbitant amount of wealth for a certain number of people and certain type of person or certain investor or whatever. Um, but I think many young people, myself included, just kind of look into the future and go, how is this sustainable? It's not even possible that this could happen again. And if it did, like, what poor souls would we then give birth to? Our children are going to be extra fucked if this, if we continue this, literal shot to the moon, economically. That how is that going to work in the long term? So again, there's like, jealousy on the sense that like it would have been nice to have lived through that myself. I think a lot of the young kids wish they were in the 80s or whatever because of that time period. Not only just that, but there's the aesthetic and the whole like no phones of it all. So that I think in general a lot of young people are jaded for that reason or because of those reasons. And I think the contemptuous comes from just like this. It just appears selfish. I'm not saying that it is selfish or that it there isn't it wouldn't be me if I was also in their situation. But I'm watching old people today and they're just kind of they're probably retired or whatever, but they're just milling around like a Cracker Barrel, like buying sweatshirts. And it's like what the fuck kind of, I mean, I don't know. If I feel like if I was retired and I worked my whole life, like, is it really that the only thing left to do is just go out and buy just junk? You're 75. You haven't grown at all. Like, you're the same size. Do you really need another sweatshirt? And then why then are you buying, a sweatshirt from a Cracker Barrel? It's not even like you're getting like a high quality threads or it's something you've always wanted. You're like, this is junk. This is low quality stuff. So it's not even like you're here for quality. Like, so are you just buying this like socially so that you have something to do? I think these people are just so unbelievably bored with their life. They haven't, they spent a lot of their life, listening to people, taking other people's advice, doing what they say, get a job, go to school, get to work, have kids, find somebody who's nice enough, whatever. But they listen to all this, and then now they've never really taken the time to develop, I'm not going to say a personality, but just like a sense of, sense of self, which I think is different. The personality is, how you interact with others, whereas a sense of self is like your true inner identity, like your deepest desires, your deepest fears, and like all your insecurities. That's like your true nucleus of yourself. But, if you've only ever considered and thought about the superficial, the skin, the husk of your being, you're not really going to have developed, deep interests or deep passions and things. So yeah, you might end up buying fucking sweaters at Cracker Barrel, which is just, in my mind, just kind of a reprehensible existence at that age and that time. And I'm not saying I would never buy something at a store ever, but like just the amount of people milling around, and just I've seen this time and time and time again. It's not like this is an isolated incident where it's just one old person. The vast majority of people in that age group just don't really have any. They're not even really, not say they're not people, but they don't have, they don't really have these strong interests or passions or things that they actually want to do. They do things because they're told to do them, and then they get rewarded for doing them well. So they're just kind of following instructions a lot. And that's maybe just who's left after the people that have actually, had their own ambitions and done things. But, and maybe this just means I'm too much, on the side of, being, the best individual or kind of cultivating your best self. Whereas, other cultures and people might be more, collectively minded. I think about the Soviet Union or the, Chinese Communist Party, where it's people don't really view themselves as individuals. And that's not necessarily like, that sounds, I say that and it sounds like a slur, but that's not what I mean. I mean that in the sense that, people, are to put the motherland first, right? Russia comes first for, your sense of individuality. So if you're, a prisoner on a slave or you're an escaped whatever, it's just like your existence is for the benefit of your country. The sense of patriotism, I think, is even stronger to some extent. Now, it also results in infinitely more, death and hardship and torture, than we have over here, in the freedom land, where, you can do what you want, say what you want. And there's a sense of individuality. But I don't know that collective living is a better way to live either. There are certainly drawbacks to individuality, like, making the decisions on what you actually want to do, what you're capable of doing, and what I guess you can be compensated for, society at large. But, I also think kind of blindly accepting, the doctrines and beliefs and the, instructions of, people that represent a kind of a vague, national interest. I don't see that as being, both beneficial at an individual level, because you're abdicating your autonomy to whatever the state wants you to do. But also just for, I think, the betterment of mankind as a species. 'Cause I don't really see, and maybe this is just the way I see things. I don't see, I don't see nations as being as atomic as they truly are. It's like I don't know that, this idea of China, this idea of Russia, is like so foreign to, the idea of an American or the United States that, everything I should do should be dedicated towards the betterment of America. It's like I think if the U.S. or if China or other things kind of fall and, reshape into new things, I shouldn't have my whole sense of identity stripped. Like, for example, if, the CCP dissolved tomorrow, for whatever, crazy reason, which is, again, I'm not saying it's unlikely, sure, but like, Rome fell. All of our societies throughout time have all fallen, right? It's not like if you ask anybody at the height of their society or even at like the beginning of their downturn, they're going to say, well, it's always been around. Like, what do you mean it's not going to exist? I have intellectually accepted, and even emotionally, but that's trivial, emotionally accepted that the end of the United States is a possible, and perhaps, arguably, depending on my mood, a likely outcome. I'm not ever saying that it's not possible for that to happen. I understand that it could end. All of this could end. That all the good and the bad, all that could be over at some point. And it likely will be at some point. Again, we don't know when, but that is a concept that I'm not unfamiliar with. But, if the state were to fall, if the Soviet Union or the CCP were to fall completely, and people have tied their entire identity to something outside of themselves, aka the state, I view that as being problematic, both on a, a broader social level, but also as, at a, individual atomic level, where it's not, people don't have, because even if you're committing your life to the state, what importance then is it of, loyalty to friends and other people? It's like, right, well, I'm more loyal to the state than I am my friends. So it's possible that I could alienate all my friends by being loyal to the state. Again, it's all, that's all it is. And I realize that many people aren't loyal out of, like they don't wake up. They weren't born and like, oh, I would love to be a slave of the Soviet Union. That is my lifelong dream. Like, obviously no one, wakes up that way. It's, it's indoctrination. It's, pressure. It's force. Like, if they kidnap my whole family and, put a gun to my head and make me do manual labor for the benefit of the motherland, how many choices do I have? Like, not really. I guess besides letting myself die or letting them torture my family, I don't really have anything else. I can't do anything else. So it's not like I fault people for having that kind of mindset. But, because I have the, dare I say, privilege to be able to not think that way, I think it's part of, my duty to cultivate a sense of self. Even if that has its flaws, much more so than, a collective nation. And the other thing with, individuality in general is that, on paper, it is always less efficient than, if people didn't have autonomy. And maybe these like free market absolutists, will disagree with this, but I truly think that, a I guess a perfectly or an ideally run, I'm not going to say perfectly as that's not possible, but a communist or even a dictatorship or something, or anywhere where the state has absolute power and people are beholden to, the state at all, at all costs. I think that is a more powerful method of efficiency than, people being individuals and having their own ideas and, this free market. I truly do think that in terms of efficiency, you can get more labor and more output, essentially by putting a gun to everyone's head. Now, the difference is it's hard to put a gun to everyone's head. That's not our natural inclination, which, again, I think our natural inclination would be more, be more of the individual autonomy. But, it's not practical to have a gun to everyone's head. And then, there's also a lot of, issues of, force, because then it's all like this big ring of, leverage over one another. And then, I guess pitting people against each other for the benefit of the state. Again, which most people in that situation have little choice. But I suppose as someone who's able to, be an individual, I feel like it's part of what I'm supposed to do. Because the other thing about it, with an individual, you don't really know what their, creation or what their contribution to society or the world or even themselves is. Like, in many cases, people either don't ever take the time or the effort to really develop themselves, not develop themselves, but to become themselves, right? Whatever that even means. Like, they're either somebody that someone else has made or their parents made them to, or, the school system or their employer or whoever. But even if they do attempt to do something, there's no telling what that could be or if that will be a financial success, right? It's like maybe I could, this reminds me of this guy's coincidentally, he's Korean, I think, or Chinese. But he dedicated his entire life to like writing or building a Chinese typewriter. And it had like, something like 20,000 moving parts. It was this labor of love. This guy spent his entire life trying to make a typewriter that could write, Chinese without like some hacky half language thing. It's like a full actual typewriter, like you could type, English. But he dedicated his entire life to it. But then, like, towards the end of his life, it had been kind of replaced by, digital typewriter. So there was no need for a physical typewriter anymore. So his work was kind of, worthless. But to me, that is still like a perfect, again, I'm using that word kind of loosely, but a perfect encapsulation of like a good life is that this guy really cared about something, really did it, and executed it. And like, yeah, he obviously didn't make $1 billion and, isn't Zuckerberg or whatever, but this guy built something that was his idea that he wanted to do. It's never been done before. He created it. And yeah, it wasn't like it was I guess a commercial flop, to put it that way. But to say that like his life is a failure, or that, I would rather have a guy that just, worked a construction job for 40 years would be completely false. Like, I would so much rather have that guy, who cared about what he wanted, and that is, what he got stuck on, and that's, that is what his legacy is really. And I think that is a life well lived. That's a good ass life. But people don't, again, you don't know what you're going to get though. So if you can't like, I'm not saying everyone's going to build a typewriter if you let people do what they want, but you can't really tell. You don't know what people are going to do if you give them the ability to choose what they can do, and time, and the means and the people and all that to do what they want. But again, also I would also attribute most of our modern, I even say like life changing or society changing evolutions have all been people in that exact scenario where they're through whatever means, whether it's just grit or, maybe it's just lucky, serendipity, but they are in these circumstances where they're able to pour themselves into something and, they create something brilliant. Um, so yeah, I think that's the upside of, living, I guess backing individuality versus, the benefit of the state, because people, the autonomy is kind of beaten out of them. Uh, which I think I'm just, that's one big like defense of mine is like, I'm just uh, trying very hard to not, let my sense of self get beaten out of me. And part of this is difficult because it's like, you know, I could ask myself this question, which is a fair question. There's nothing, illegal about this question to myself. But it's like, all right, if I'm like, so focused on, defending like who I am or, what I value or whatever, who is that exactly? Like, can you articulate precisely who you are and such that, this is this person that you don't want to be corrupted or whatever? It's like, why, just because, but I think just because you don't have like, you're not able to articulate your perfect idea of self or your, everything that embodies you or something into some coherent and, sentence that is, I guess, good enough for whoever, whatever skeptic is asking. I don't think that means that you don't deserve the ability or the space or the time to, allow yourself to, develop into that person, whoever that may be. Because I also don't think it's possible to describe like someone asks me like who I am or what do I do every day. It's like I do a lot of different things. Like, what am I good at? It depends who you ask. It depends the context. I don't know. It's like even those questions, which again should be mostly straightforward, even mechanically straightforward. Like they're just simple. They're simple from all angles. Is is something that would stymie me for a while, right? And trying to determine who exactly, is this a fair representation of myself. So I don't think the inability or the refusal to answer to those notions, you know, remove your autonomy or make you any less of a person that you are than than otherwise. But I think people are often you're more willing to side with the majority, and the majority is that either I'm a venture capitalist, I got 2 kids, I love golf, it's like all right, then that's fine. And I even envy these people that are that simple. It's like all right, if you're truly like every bit of just the accountant that loves golf and wants to you know, I guess hang out with his kids. I think that's perfect, and I think that's great. That's wonderful, you know. But some people are, while there are simple people, some people are more complicated, and they would laugh or they would, scoff or they would be angry with any of those, those ideas that there's some restricting definition of oneself. Which is maybe the more closer to the way I see it is I don't like to be defined at all, and not because definitions are always bad, but only because I think defining a human allows you to then create extrapolations based off of what that definition is. So it's like, all right, well, this guy defines himself as an accountant. Great. Now I can now treat all these accountants as numbers, right? It's like, all right, now we have 10,000 accountants. So then like you're just kind of playing like SimCity with people, which I think is kind of an ultimate sin. It's like I think we should all agree individually and collectively, really, because collectively we are just kind of the result of individuals working together or putting things together, which is greater than the individual, but still, like very much, we're still individuals that make up society. Nobody has all of the answers, so but forcing people to not letting people allow like make their own answers for things, I think is uh, uh, the ultimate sin, right? Kind of like imposing. It's almost like this. I've talked before about this copyleft life philosophy, where it's like your life philosophy can be whatever you like. Like if you, want to dedicate yourself to Satanism, okay, fine. But the difference is you can't like Satanism cannot impose onto other people's worldviews and require either that they be Satanist or that they, somehow give their life in with regard to Satanism. Now there are obviously like ways you can be respectful. You can say, well, Satanists, don't eat meat on Sundays. It's like, all right, well then we won't, just out of respect, we won't eat meat on Sundays. But like, if the religion is, well, Satanists murder their first child, I think you're now making a decision of life or death for somebody else, and the fact of you're going to murder your child, that to me is kind of an obvious like, well, that's not right, that's wrong. And same with other philosophies too, where they require other people to then, not just like trivial kind of trivial ways of being just you know trivial hospitalities. I'm speaking more of like existential, like you must value Satan above all else. It's like I think that's kind of like forcing your like vague philosophical ideas on people are that's much different than again just being hospitable to someone that might have a essentially a dietary restriction or some other quirk. To me that's not a quirk, but I think it applies again far beyond religion too. Just even with worldviews on things, it's like if you are an economist and you want to view all accountants as just these this number of workers, right? This all labor, all people is just labor and time. That's everything can be boiled down to time, people, and labor or something like that. Which again, to me, is like such a comically insulting way to reduce humanity into just like these different buckets of time, labor. Again, all of this for fucking what? What? So we can go to Mars? Like society for what, dude? Literally, what are we doing all this for? Why? Is that a great life to be a cog in the machine of time, labor, and work? It's like, what are you doing all this for? Like again, this even bring it back to the Soviet Union. I think fine, Mother Russia's great. Like then what? Like okay, we took over the world. Then what? Am I going to finally be able to wipe my own ass? It's like probably not. Okay, it's like there's no. These aren't like this doesn't even mean like it's for a good life. This is just people's way of like understanding and living through their in their world. Um, anyway, I forgot what I was talking about. But either way, just imposing your worldview onto other people, I view as a very paramount sin. Where it's like what I think is important needs to be what you think is important, and it's like I don't think that's not the way to do it. I don't think you should be allowed to impose what you think is important on other people. Now, I think you can disagree with them, and you can obviously like debate is not is is obviously open. You're always allowed to debate and maybe even try to convince people. Even like maybe like the way the Mormons do or something, where it's like, well, you sure you don't like God? But I think uh, choking somebody out and forcing them to come to church, I think that's the problem, right? But I think you can present your ideas in a way that might be logical or persuasive, and then if people decide to change their mind, then that's great. I think the way that I like to think about this is like, are people like think about people trying to convince you to believe something, whatever it might be. Are they using like fear and force and power to like try to convince you, or is it more of an invitation, right? I think even credit to the Mormons, they at least know that like people like having fun, like nice things. They like being like, so if you ever talk to a Mormon, like you go out to Mormon country, they are so fucking nice to you. They're so nice. They'll ask questions. They're like, they all seem like your best friends, and it's not. And again, I'm not Mormon. I don't want to be Mormon. I think they're weird. But again, I respect at least that they are trying to evangelize through what I think is the moral method, which is again maybe some of it's fake, but like again still being cordial, being nice, trying to be persuasive, even giving them a book or something about whatever dipshit found the gold plates that he shit on. I don't really even know what the story of Mormon. I mean, I know the story of Mormonism vaguely, but the specifics of me are always funny. But regardless, it's like they're not using force and like fear and the end of the world to convince you to join their cult. It's not a doomsday death cult. It's just an open invitation to something that you might enjoy. And many people that get themselves involved into these things, a lot of times they're cults, and it's not because that like they believe half the shit that the cult is saying. Like they probably don't even want to. It's always some cult leader is like this god of sex, and everyone has to have sex with him. It's like, first of all, why is everyone all just about sex? Like, why is it all about sex all the time? It's just weird. Make it about something else. Why not about like some the rabbits or something? It's like a super important rabbit that we have to protect. I don't know. It's always some weird sex thing. But either way, people don't convince themselves to believe these things because they are true or because they're even persuasive. It's mostly because they're either scared or they want company, right? They're fucking bored and they're lonely. And if the only person that they have that'll listen to them is some guy that makes you suck his dick every 3 days, but otherwise is pretty good to you. For some people, and this is terrible to say, but for some people, that's not that bad of a deal. That's pretty good actually. So it's like they'll put up with the weird sex stuff as long as they have a community and have this family, I guess, with this guy or whatever. Or girls can run cults too. There's nothing inherently masculine about running a cult. I mean, there probably is, but I mean, I don't know. I'm just opening it up there. It's my olive branch. But regardless, people don't fall into those traps because they want. It's invitation. There's some underlying reason. But if you just look at the fact that this guy's a Satanist, this guy's an idiot, he's in a sex cult, he must be retarded. It's like, okay, well, yes, it's maybe there's, he's probably not the smartest person in the world because he fell for that, but ultimately, like, they're not, fundamentally different from you, and they, want and understand and desire a lot of the same things. They're just, either not smart enough or they have different methods of trying to procure those things for themselves. Which again isn't inherently, there's no inbuilt ranking to the way, good and bad ways to live. That's why we kind of have to. That's the whole purpose of philosophy and ethics at all, is just to kind of try to create those things for ourselves or for others. Um, and again, if you take my views, you don't make them for others, you make them for yourselves, and then again through, uh, you know, people watching how you exist and go, oh, that's actually kind of cool. This even might extend to something that's more, it's more in line with the topics of this channel, but like with Linux and stuff. So not to say that I run around and again I'm not choking anyone out to switch to Linux, but I'm not shy about the fact that I genuinely think Linux is far superior in every conceivable facet to the other operating systems. And you could say like, well, usability, it's actually easier. I think you need to like, we should have a driver's test for computers. Like there's too many idiots using computers, and it's not idiots. There's too many technologically illiterate people trying to use computers, and that ruins software and a lot of computer technology for everyone, because you have to make them for idiots, and idiots don't know how to use a computer. So by making it, quote unquote, more accessible to idiots that don't know how to use computer, or sorry, they could learn they refuse to learn how to use a computer. You essentially create garbage and mess for everyone else to sift through. People that actually know what they're doing have to sift through, monumental piles of crap. Either way, regardless, that's besides the point. The point is that, with Linux, I'm often telling people about the good things and the things that I can accomplish, and how much easier I can accomplish them, or even the privacy benefits of Linux, or even just like the tinkerability, like the fact that I want to install software, I want to try doing this, I like tinkering with things. Maybe I even sue me. I like sailing the high seas from time to time. If you know what I mean. But telling people these things, that they're often like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. Like, how could I run Linux? It's like, well, it's really not that hard. You just need a USB stick, an old computer that you want to breathe some life into, and But it's not. I'm not telling anyone by force. There's no law that's deciding people. It's an invitation. We're opening the door and saying, you know what, the world's much better over here. If you want in, like, we're not excluding people. If you want it, all you got to do is this. And it's like, that's the way to, truly to evangelize things, is to invite people, not to fear and to put a gun in their face or choke them out to make them do what you want. Now there's other, there's more sly ways of choking people out with niceness, but that's not what I mean. But in general, I think, the Linux example is a good one, where it's, I'm trying to invite people by showing them the benefits of, this, this way to live. And even same with like, the food thing. It's like, I'm not gonna, I'm not saying that Pop-Tarts shouldn't exist. Now, I think in a free market where people respect themselves, they don't exist because no one would buy them. But regardless, I'm still allowing people the choice to eat like shit and be fat. That's still an open option. But I'm trying to invite them and saying, hey, the world can be much better. You can be less of a burden on the medical system. People will, not some people will love you more, but they probably will. By treating your body with respect and caring for it and exercising and eating healthy. And it's not, again, I'm not strong arming anyone into do that. The more Mother Russia way to do it would be to enslave everybody and run them, make them run mile repeats until they start losing weight. But that's not the strategy that I think is the most effective. I think invitation is much more powerful than force and lethality and threatening people with weapons and death or starvation and things. That's often what a lot of persuasion is now. It's like, well, don't you want to not starve to death? It's like, well, that's a very inviting way to frame that, and that's rarely the case. It's rarely the case that like you'll actually starve to death, or that all that is it's it's genuine fear mongering. Because they're trying to make you scared so that you do something. But I just don't think that's helpful. Both from a if it's a political ideology you're trying to push, or again maybe a technical one, maybe it's a Linux thing or whatever. It's just not helpful to scare people into stuff. It's like I think if you're evangelizing Linux, you shouldn't also go, well, you're going to get hacked and all your family photos are going to be deleted and hackers are going to come kill your family too. All because you're running Windows. That is also the wrong way to do that. I would never. Maybe I've done that as a joke, but I've never. I don't ever do that in a serious manner. Only ever joking. Like I said, everything on this channel is in some form or the other a joke. But I think that's also the wrong way to go about it. It's not the way to do it. Do you do it like the Mormons? You're nice. You show people how great it is over here, and they'll look like, you know what? Maybe I want to try that. That actually seems fun. And then they, soon enough they're doing it the same way. They go, you know what? Again, there's no pressure with any of this. I'm not trying to be whatever, but I just genuinely think your life will be better if you do this. Um, this is my other problem with like sales in general. Like the reason I have trouble selling things is that I always try to think in terms of like, all right, like, what are the big fish first? Big fish first, big fish first. So, like, but most of the people who are buying and selling are not big fish. They're like buying and selling, I don't know, like brainwave depression kits or something like that. I don't even know. Like they're selling just like garbage plastic crap. And again, maybe there's like a small medicinal benefit, or let's even take like a vitamin, for example, like, I don't know, like ashwagandha. People would be peddling, or if I was a salesman for ashwagandha, I could be like, oh, it's going to change your life. It's so great. The truth is it's not. It's a tiny little vitamin. It, might make a marginal difference, but ultimately what makes 99% up of your, well-being is like the amount of sleep you're getting, the diet, and your lifestyle. So if you're active or not, like that is so much bigger of a fish than any small little micro. And I'm not saying I'm in favor of, the small vitamin or a small other amendment to something. But the idea that these should be making up like your primary, building blocks of a good diet is, vitamin B12 and ashwagandha it's fucking moronic. What are the biggest fish? Think proportionally to the actual problem, right? Proportionally, all right, what are the important things? Sleep, eating, exercise. Okay, those should occupy the vast majority of my just mental energy and all of that should be geared towards those big things, because those are the biggest fish. They will always be the biggest fish, and no amount of ashwagandha or B12 is going to fix that. Those are the big fish. If those are not locked in completely and perfected, it doesn't matter what little fucking supplements you're going to have. Again, short of like complete hormone replacement therapy like testosterone, there's nothing more powerful than those three things: diet, sleep, and exercise. And I've even tried to like, get out of this, and maybe it is like a secret vitamin. No, there's no secret vitamins. It's all bullshit. All right. Some of the stuff can be marginally helpful, or just it can even probably give you peace of mind, right? It might just help you sleep at night if you just take an ashwagandha pill and someone tells you did a good job, whatever. But the idea that is going to make any appreciable difference in your well-being is comical. It is always, it is not. It's what are the biggest fish? Think proportionally to the problem, or the or what the the focus is. Not proportionally to whatever someone's trying to sell you. But again, going back to my issue with sales is that I think most sales is like what they're selling you and how much it costs is not proportional to. It's not proportional to the benefit that you would accrue. But it's also not proportional to the amount of time and energy and money that you should be focusing on. It's just not that much. It's not that worthwhile. Again, it's an ashwagandha gummy. If you want me to be honest with you, it's not the end of the world. If your sleep and diet's not locked in, it's not going to do anything for you. But like that would never sell anyone. No one would ever say that. It's like, well, he told me I should lose weight and that would be helpful. It's like, yes, that is the more honest and like more helpful response, is that a ashwagandha gummy is not going to help you lose weight. You need to get, like, there's nothing I can supplement you, besides a weight loss drug or something. There's nothing that I can genuinely give you that'll be better advice than get 8 hours of sleep, exercise, and stop eating garbage. And I guess people, they love this shortcut, and sometimes the shortcut is like, it's always going to come back to bite the people. With Ozempic and Wegovy now, I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for the, maybe it'll be in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. I'll go, oh, we didn't know that. Man, it actually causes cancer at 40 times the rate of other stuff. It's like, man, how could we have known that? It's like, in general, we need to fuck with our physiology much less. I think, I'm not, and we need to fuck with the world much less in general. Like, we play around with and we fuck with, our natural world, our environment, and that has already, been, it's already kind of a big issue, and it's going to be, it's going to frighten us more and more, I feel like. But now we're also fucking with our body, putting shit in it that we're in theory should work, but what the fuck does theory mean really? Or how useful is theory in the absolute? Who knows? But then we don't think of these unintended consequences. We just go, oh well, this will be easy to sell, right? A drug, you just one little prick and you can lose weight. Like, dude, we're gonna have no trouble selling this. They're all thinking about how we could sell this, And it's not, all right, is this actually a good long-term solution for people trying to lose weight? No, it's not. Do you want to know what a good long-term solution for people losing weight is? Can you guess? Diet, sleep, and exercise. It's the same three. But there's no pill that's going to do that for you, right? I mean, testosterone will get you there, but that is going to have unintended consequences. Everyone knows that. You're going to be bald, you'll have tits, whatever. And then, of course, Wegovy's like, well, there are no side effects. Just wait. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But this has happened time and time again. The look on my face when it turns out that there's some horrible disease that it gives you, the look on my face will not be surprised. Let's just put it that way. I will not be surprised at all. It will just be another moment of "I told you so," which I feel like has happened a lot. But it's not even like I want to be the "I told you so" guy. I just feel like people need to not get "I told you so" by being more cognizant of what they're doing. In general, it's probably even just with most things, one way to not fuck something up is to leave it alone, right? So the human bodies already have an inordinate amount of complexity, put towards, balancing these different hormones and, digesting food, all these different things. In general, like the more natural you can be, like your body has all of the shit built in. Again, there's exceptions with, autoimmune disorders, which I have, by the way. So it's not like I'm talking about nobody. I understand this. There are exceptions, but in general, the less fucking with it you can do, the better, right? So it's like, again, the less, machines and pills, the less you need, the better, right? I think that is a good rule of thumb to adopt, especially when it comes to putting shit in your body, right? Not food, but just like extra shit in your body. Food, is just enough, really. You just need just enough food, not too much, just enough. That would be that. But with vitamins and supplements and stuff, it's like, are you certain that you need this? Like if somebody had taken blood work and said, oh, you have a potassium deficiency. Otherwise, I don't know that you need to be popping, 10, 20, 30 potassium pills. Like, do you really think that's important? I don't know. Just in general, fucking with it probably will fuck it up. So, I don't know. Whatever. The other thing, about, I guess, humanity and, diseases and whatever, I think mutations within a species would occur at a rate that would outpace the ability to research and understand those said, mutations. So, for example, I don't know that, playing catch up with diseases will ever work. Meaning that, there are new diseases that, have arisen because of civilization. Like cancer was not really, maybe it existed, it totally did exist. It just obviously wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is now. But that's true for a lot of, these quote unquote diseases of civilization where it has only come about, as a function of time and is getting worse over time. So it's like as society continues to develop, we're having more of these problems. And again, I think a number of this, notwithstanding everything, but is, related to the crap that we're putting in our bodies and the way that, we're fueling and, our lifestyles, is a major factor. But I think even, suppose there's a new cancer, in 20 years, there's, I don't know, cancer 2.0, that's a secret kind of, I don't know, it's some new thing. It's some new problem that everyone has. Everyone's getting cancer from, the new Cheez-Its or Pop-Tarts that they're selling. Whatever it is, I don't really know, but suppose it comes out. I don't think, by the time we actually solve cancer 1, we'll have cancer 2. Then might have cancer 3, then cancer 4. Again, I think we'll have an infinitely more number of these problems before we, and I do think there is obviously the human body is finite, so there's a certain, finitude to all of this. So it's theoretically possible that we do actually figure everything out, and it's like, oh, boom, we actually understand the human body. We can make a fake heart. We can make everything. Health is solved. Like, we did it. Boom. That is, again, theoretically possible, but I would put the odds of that actually happening, if I were to be a true Bayesian about this, I would put those odds at about 0.01% that would actually happen. I think the better way to go about it would be like, all right, let's try to avoid the amount of disease possible, not try to outpace, diseases with our research, right? To try to research it more. Because even diseases that are well researched, like we've just finally eradicated polio however many years later, like that's one of the problems. Now we still have a gajillion other of these, diseases of civilization or other diseases from shitty lifestyle or whatever. How much longer do we need to solve all those? It's like you're kind of asking a lot of these people. And I think, especially if you don't work in the research or medical industry, you're just kind of like, well, we're gonna solve that easily. Like we'll cure cancer, no problem. It's like, okay, fine. We're gonna have more other problems. We're just gonna have these new secret problems, and we've already seen, like, even within my lifetime, where these incidents of diseases and mental health didn't exist 100 years ago. Like, it was like you either a loony or you were normal. Like, if you were a loony, like, people they would lock you up, or they'd lobotomize you, and that would be the end of it. Right? They would just chop half your brain in half, and you'd be like, all right, good, you're cured or whatever. Go mill around in the grass like a cow. That's essentially what they would do if you're mentally ill. But now it's like this whole thing where we have like 48,000 different mental illnesses, and there's bipolar disorder, there's OCD, there's OPCD, there's again like 40 billion different mental illnesses, and who knows how many more of these things can happen. I'm not saying that's none of that's real, but I'm saying our ability to conceptualize, understand, and cure, I'll say cure, even ameliorate these problems, will always be outpaced by the mutations and the continual problems we'll have as society develops. So I don't know that putting our eggs in, like, oh, we'll solve that eventually. Like, well, yeah, we solved polio. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of time. It's a matter of time before Cancer 2 comes out, then Cancer 3, and then it's we're gonna solve all those and be like, I think that it will be outpaced no matter what. So we should not, put our focus on trying to minimize. We should put our focus on trying to minimize the number of instances of cancer one or any of the cancers, versus, banking on AI figuring it out or whatever. But of course, that's just my opinion. All this is. But anyway, thanks for watching. Peace out. I'll see you guys in the next one.